Milosevic Trial.
Please be seated. Yes, Mr. Knight.
I'm just confirming that the court, as indeed the accused and the amici, do in fact have the documents that I've been producing on the Elmo.
Thank you.
Sorry, just confirming that the court, the accused, and learned friends, the amici, do in fact have the documents. I hope most of them or all of them that are being produced publicly. It seemed to me, given sometimes the difficulty of reading documents on the overhead projector, desirable to have hard copies for yourselves.
Yes, we have them.
Thank you. I return to 3 or 4 bits of evidence connected to the man Arkan, who was himself, of course, unequivocally connected to Serbia. First, on the 2nd of July of 1997, following the arrest of a man called Slavko Dokmanovic, who was charged in respect of the Ovčara massacre by this tribunal, the man Hadzic fled to the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Did the accused make any effort to bring this man to justice? No, he did not. Then let's turn again to Arkan, who provides a good illustration of how this unified operation may have worked. Said in the indictments to be a member of the joint criminal enterprise and a career criminal in his own right. His record is well known. Engaged in robbery and other offences in Belgrade and on the Montenegrin coast, wanted in several European countries on very, very serious charges, including murder. The sort of thing that could provide for his home state a lever, because he was a man they could extradite at any time, because there was outstanding indictments against him elsewhere. Did they? No. He was used, and in 1991 formed his Serbian volunteer guard, known as the Tigers, out of a nucleus of people who may have had entirely disreputable pasts, and for the most part all entirely. Training centres were set up in Tenja and Erdut in Croatia, and of course Erdut becomes one of the major crime scenes in the Croatian indictment. He was appointed as commander of the Center of Special Training of Volunteers in eastern Slavonia, based in Erdut, by the Krajina government, presided over by Hadzic, with whom he was constantly in contact on crime scenes such as Vukovar and elsewhere. Incidentally, we're looking at a picture of Arkan and, of course, someone else. Arkan claimed publicly that he was appointed as a special advisor of Hadzic. Throughout the relevant time, they had close political and business relations. His Tigers, as they were known, were better equipped than other units. They actually had the same category of weapons as the MUP special forces. In contrast to other paramilitary groups, they had strict command structures and discipline. Witnesses will reveal how Arkan and his Tigers were connected to the State Security Service of Serbia's Interior Ministry, and that they were indeed supplied from that service's arms depot. Arkan was himself a frequent visitor to the Territorial Defence Command Post in Erdut, photograph now being shown on the overhead projector. The commander of the Territorial Defence and the head of that post was a man called Radovan Stojicic Badza, who was also a high official in the Serbian Interior Ministry and a personal associate of this accused. The witness will reveal how Arkan and all the other paramilitary leaders and Krajina Serb leaders at the Erdut command post answered directly to the Serbian Badzas authority. Soon after the fall of Vukovar, that man, Badza, was promoted, rather than anything else, by the accused to the post of Deputy Minister of the Interior in charge of Public Security Service. The Chamber will recall what I said at the beginning about the powers of patronage and will have in mind in due course whether this was patronage by way of reward or recognition. Turning back to Arkan, he said of himself and his troops that they were under the direct command of Yugoslav armed forces, and he said that at a press conference in Erdut on the 27th of November of 1991. One of the commanding generals, Andrija Bjočević, now I beg your pardon, I've gone wrong. I must show first a tape, and the tape reveals what we may come to understand is truly meant by the word surrender, and it goes on, I think, to show something of what the man Arkan describes, putting things rather more succinctly. May we see it?
We don't take any more prisoners. We're going to kill every fascist soldier we catch. They have to know that.
No prisoners.
No prisoners.
No.
Ljudi htjeli da juriše. Vi možete, ne znam koliko da tučete tehnikom, ako nemate čovjeka koji će se tamo.
There was a passage of tape that I think got omitted, but it doesn't matter about that. What we've seen is Arkan making his position quite clear. One of the commanding generals, Bjočević, put it this way at the same time. Speaking of the allegations made about the use of paramilitary formulations, he said this. Some say that I conspire with paramilitary formations. These are not paramilitary formations. They are people who come voluntarily to fight for the Serbian people. We surround a village. They enter it, kill those who refuse to surrender, and we go in. Well, those observations by Bjočević, who got a medal for his exploits at Vukovar, reflect conduct that is without excuse in law or fact if crimes are being committed. Complete involvement by one and the other party in the common enterprise. On one occasion, during the battle for Vukovar, Arkan found himself trapped behind Croatian lines. And what happened, in a quote that we have via the Secretary of Simovic, is instructive. It reads as follows, and is on the screen for those who wish to follow it. So I hope it's on the screen. No, I think you've got your paper over the light source. Yeah. One night, they managed to get inside the defense perimeter, and then the army was ordered to withdraw, and Arkan and his courageous boys remained inside the defense perimeter. We had, and it refers to somebody who is of no significance for these purposes, on the line. He gave us the news and asked Simovic to order the Air Force to act. But nobody knew Arkan's exact whereabouts. Then let the Air Force fly over Vukovar to frighten them and distract their attention so that the volunteers can get out, asked the man Kum. and a visibly distraught Simovic requested that the Air Force fly over Vukovar, but refrain from action in order not to shoot our own. Then the same night, we stayed online with KUM and the headquarters of JNA units. It was nearly dawn when we heard that the volunteers had managed to get out, but that Arkan was not to be found anywhere. He'd remained back inside the perimeter, captured again. All hope seemed already lost when we were told that Arkan had surfaced and was coming to see Simovic. He appeared without a trace of fatigue, as if nothing had happened to him, under full arms, with a sniper gun across his shoulder and a bloody Ustasha hat hang on it. He entered the office together with KUM and some of his buddies to tell us how he himself had killed 24 Ustashas in that one night and had captured the sniper gun that he bought as a present for Simovic. So in other words, Arkan, in the control of the, as it were, enemy within Croatia, brings out Serbia's defense minister intervening with the Air Force to come to his aid. Simovic was, of course, subordinate to this accused and acted on his orders. Was Serbia not involved in this? Impossible. If Serbia was involved at this level, who, of course, this accused? And we see through this one incident the whole range of forces acting in concert. Your Honour, documents that I used to know by the unappealing name of organograms, and that are now sometimes referred to by the possibly more useful name of wiring diagrams, can be helpful documents for various reasons, providing they're not regarded in any way as over-precise descriptions of what they seek to portray. Now, what we have here, I'll get my own copy out. What we have here is such a diagram, and some important things to note about it, but it may summarize the prosecution's view, subject to a number of provisos. And I hope it's visible, but if it isn't, I'll read out the title at the top. This is a simplified illustration of the accused's participation in joint criminal enterprise for the crimes charged for Croatia. It doesn't suggest itself, as we see in the box at the bottom left, to represent command and control between the parties, nor is that required for the purposes of this joint criminal enterprise. We see the accused represented in the top at the middle. On the left, the Rump presidency, to which I've referred, with his principal enforcers there, Jovic and Kostic, they having command over the JNA with the various personalities referred. The direct line going from the accused to the JNA, again, doesn't suggest direct lines of control, influence, and participation. Look then, please, if you will, to the right side of the diagram. Here you have the Croatian Serb leadership, Babic, Martic, and Hadžić. They, of course, via the Krajina, perhaps that intervening box doesn't take very much, but via the government, or however, have control over Martic's police on the right, the local Serb territorial defense a little to the left. The accused's influence on, connection with, the Croatian Serb leadership leads to his influence on, control of, the Serb territorial defense and Martic's police. Then let's look at the middle section. Coming from the accused, we have the Serbian Ministry of Defense and Tomislav Simovic. We've made a passing reference to Šešel's men. We'll hear more about those in the course of the trial. under the MOD. Then we have the Serbian Ministry of Interior, the MUP, with again various people referred to underneath the accused, or, although not necessarily directly under him on any de jure or strictly legal interpretation of the structure, certainly under his influence. And the names are referred to there. The SDB or SJB part of the MUP, spawning the Red Berets and the Arkanovci. All of these groups, starting at the left, the JNA, Šešel's men, the Red Berets and Arkanovci, the local Serb territorial defense and Matić's police, feature in the commission of these crimes, and in a schematic way, but subject to the careful reservations that I've already made, and of course entirely subject to what the evidence reveals. This may represent, and I hope helpfully, the approach of the prosecution to the responsibility of this accused. And of course the middle section is perhaps the section he would most need to hide, the part dealing with the MUP and so on. And the complexity, and it may be that such a plan will need to become much more complicated as the evidence emerges if we are to use it or substitute for it a similar document. The complexity of it really reveals and confirms the need of this accused to hide what he was doing. For it may have been always difficult or impossible for him to accept that Serbia could be seen to be at war. So things were dealt with in another way, via the Republic's army and other agencies. Back briefly again to Arkan and then to another topic. Arkan amassed enormous wealth in Serbia. He's placed by one witness along with Šešel in Vukovar, and the same witness confirms that his Tigers, or Serbian Volunteer Guard, were established, as that wiring diagram shows, by the Serbian DB, part of the MUP. In 1991, Arkan and his troops came from Serbia to eastern Slavonia and set up their headquarters and controlled a wide area, cooperating with the JNA, Yugoslavia's army under Borčević. Borčević, a man who was commended on the 19th of November 1991. With those connections in mind, let me turn to an entirely different topic, Dubrovnik, but briefly, it features in the indictment. Starting in early October 1991, and perhaps we can just put the plan again. What may be thought an ambitious plan, given its geographical separation. In early 1991, the JNA and associated units from Serbia and Montenegro seized the municipality of Dubrovnik and laid siege to the city itself. The seized areas around Dubrovnik were cleansed, looted, and much was destroyed, with JNA forces shelling the city, an act that was wholly without justification, killing at least 43 Croatian civilians. The old town of Dubrovnik, a UNESCO World Cultural Heritage site, was heavily shelled and many ancient buildings damaged, despite being marked with Hague Convention symbols by international observers. The damage did not come about accidentally. The JNA shelled the town, as the following video will show, from high ground from which they had an unobstructed view. And the footage begins with a view of Dubrovnik from the heights of Žakovica. We will then see some JNA artillery soldiers using their sights to take aim towards the town of Dubrovnik. And shortly we'll see the view, the line of sight view of Žakovica from Dubrovnik itself, showing just how vulnerable they were. Reversing the image, we go back to Žakovice, where we see the type of wire-guided missiles used, waiting to be fired. And then we can see some consequences of the attack on this ancient town, damage suffered by the buildings. We will soon, I think, see some of the gunboats used by the JNA Navy. First, we see firing onto the walls, some shells ricocheting off, I think, and some doing considerable damage. There's the gunboat. We can see now, I think, or shortly, we can see boats in the marina being hit, or possibly missed, but certainly close. And then we see a survey of damage to the buildings. And this footage will end, I think, with Dubrovnik on fire. Columns of smoke rising from the town. The leadership of Montenegro was committed itself to what it described as the liberation of Dubrovnik and other parts of Croatia, along with the JNA, and supplied logistics and volunteers for the JNA. A Dubrovnik Republic, in the ambition of those involved, was to be detached and joined to Serbia. There was, of course, no need to liberate a city whose population was overwhelmingly Croat, whose Serb inhabitants suffered no discrimination and asked for no liberation. Looking at this ambition, it is helpful to know that a witness will be before you saying that at the same time, senior Montenegrin leaders, following the accused's line, said we must liberate at least to the Neretva, which is the river halfway up and running inland, and say to the Croats, never again will we live together. The same witness will testify that everyone in Podgorica, the capital of Montenegro, and in Belgrade was sure that Serbia was going to win the war quickly. And as victors, wouldn't matter what they'd done. They were so caught up with this drive, and he described the line as the Karlovac-Karlovac-Virovitica line, I beg your pardon, which is about as far towards Slovenia in the north as you could think of going, that the drive to that line, with their own invincibility, they really couldn't have cared less at the time who knew. Of course, they lied shamelessly to the few internationals who were around during the period, but they didn't care that their lies were so preposterous. The army, the evidence will be, was no better, it having committed itself to the accused's program, officers being instilled with the ideology of brotherhood and unity, totally abandoned everything in it in favor of a greater Serbia. They shared the arrogance, did the army, of the civilian leaders, and saw no reason to confer. That evidence will be before you, and of course, like all the evidence in this case, will fall for your determination in due course. A further witness will testify before you that on the 6th of December 91, General Strugar of the JNA told him that he had resorted to firing on Dubrovnik in retaliation for attacks upon his troops, a line similar to the line used by the Krajina Serbs, who resorted in due course to firing on the city of Zagreb as retaliation for what had, The Dubrovnik campaign spread over to Bosnia. In mid-October 1991, Serbian and Montenegrin forces, for example, attacked a village of Ravno in the Trebinje municipality, killing a number and expelling part of the population. The pattern always the same. The ambition at this stage high. However, the international community didn't let things pass entirely unnoticed. And in October 1991, there was a plan of Lord Carrington to achieve a peaceful dissolution of Yugoslavia and its problems. The then Montenegrin president, Milosevic, of whom we have heard, decided to accept the plan, as in his position as president of a state he was allowed, no doubt, to do. He was minded to allow the republics to decide how much independence they wanted, if they so chose. In doing this, he defied the accused, leaving Serbia as the only republic that rejected the Carrington plan. Milošević's independence of mind didn't last long. The accused made him reverse his plan or be arrested. Milošević obeyed. Starting in about the 7th of October, Serb forces of the army and of the territorial defense, with the militia and the army of Krajina, or the Krajina police, and also Martić's police, were in control of an area, Hrvatska Kostanica, which is near Bacin, a name that will become familiar to the chamber if it isn't familiar already. Most of the Croat civilians in this area had fled their homes during the attack in September, or an attack in September 91. Approximately 120 Croat civilians, mostly women, the elderly or the infirm, remained in the village of Dubica, Serovljani, and Bacin. Why, one might ask, would such people worry the JNA, or for that matter, the Krajina? Worry them or not, in late October 1991, the Serb forces rounded up the remaining 120 civilians, releasing 10 and killing the remaining 110. This accused says that he and his army sought only to preserve Yugoslavia. If so, why were such crimes necessary? Why were they intentional? For they were not incidental. Why did the elderly and the weak have to die in the way that they did? Further evidence before the tribunal, within that category described as inside or insider, will include that by the summer of 1991, Serb volunteer and police forces in the Krajina were being supplied and instructed or led by officials of the Republic of Serbia, its Ministry of Internal Affairs, and its agents. One of those agents was a man, Captain Dragan, who closely cooperated with Milan Martic, the Krajina defense minister, and the Serbian MUP representatives active in the Krajina, in particular the man of whom you will become familiar, Franki Simatovic. A word about Martic. Even after the implementation of the Vance peace plan, the man Martic, shown here, pursued the plan of ethnic division. On the 1st of October 1992, he stated publicly in Borba that the return of Croat refugees to the Krajina and to the Branja, or to Branja, was out of the question. Despite the Vance plan, he continued to favor the unification of the Krajina and the Republic of Srpska. We'll have to learn of that a little later, a plan that was already being pursued by Babić in 91. At the end of 93 and beginning of 94, Martic ran for the post of RSK president, with Babić as his only serious opponent. Martic's goal, the unification of all Serb lands. And of this man, during the election campaign, we may note he said, "I am carrying out the program drafted by our pan-Serbian president, Slobodan Milošević. The state-controlled media in Serbia supported Martic, in particular after Babic got more votes than him in the first round. And on the 24th of January 1994, he became the president of the RSK. On the 18th of February 1994, he stated publicly he was supported by this accused during his campaign, confirming that his goal would be the unification of all Serbs, and that once all Serb land be united, he would gladly hand power over to this accused. During a Croatian offensive, the so-called Operation Flash, which began in May of 1995, Martic ordered the bombardment of several towns, including Zagreb, and was indicted for these offences before this tribunal. But he was arrested in September in Otoka, which is near to Bosanska Krupa on the territory of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and it was feared that Republic police forces might extradite him to Croatia, who maintained an arrest warrant for him. Reflective of the relationships which will guide this chamber in its eventual conclusion, it was a concerted intervention by the Bosnian Serb leadership and the Serbian government that Martic was freed. He was frequently received by the accused. He accompanied the accused on talks, for example, with Russian representatives. And in August 1995, when Croatian forces retook the Krajina, Martic fled to Banja Luka and then to Serbia. In Geneva, moving on to the end of the Croatian indictment and its story, in Geneva on the 23rd of November 1991, this accused with Kadjevic and Tudjman entered into an agreement signed under the auspices of the United Nations Special Envoy Cyrus Vance. The agreement called for the lifting of blockades by Croatian forces on JNA barracks and for the withdrawal of JNA forces from Croatia. Both sides committed themselves to an immediate ceasefire throughout Croatia by units under their command, control, or political influence. They further bound themselves to ensure that any paramilitary or irregular units associated with their forces would also observe the ceasefire. Well, what units were these for which the accused, with Kadjevic, was making undertakings, if they were not the JNA Army, the Serbian Interior Ministry, and then the Croatian Serbs forces in the Krajina, Slavonia, Baranja, Western Srem, or Eastern Slavonia, as it's more conveniently described. Soon after this, recall, if the chamber would be so good, that the accused had the Krajina Serb leader Babic replaced because of his opposition to the Vance plan. Perhaps more interestingly, and a reflection of the sort of mistakes people can make when they do not actually look far enough ahead, it wasn't the local Serb leaders who signed this agreement. Perhaps they should have been, but they weren't even asked to. The accused did it. He did it for them. It was a display of power, perhaps too irresistibly tempting to hand over to anyone else. It was a display of power and authority to the international community that reflected the underlying realities of his involvement in what had gone before, his ability, had he chosen, to stop it happening, his duty to stop it and punish it, all things he didn't do because he is, as said in this indictment, guilty. On the 27th of February 1992, the accused gave a speech to the Serbian Assembly, and in it, and it's on the Elmo now, overhead projector, I'm sorry. In the highlighted passages, he acknowledges helping the Serbian people in Croatia with money, food, clothing, medicines, and also with a large number of volunteers at the front. Nothing could be clearer. A sort of peace came as a result of the advance plan in January 1992. It allowed the Krajina Serbs control of the territory they'd seized. Although Babić didn't comply with that, risking therefore the accused's anger and finding himself replaced by a more compliant leader, Goran Hadžić, not long after, in February 92. Another ceasefire agreement signed by Tudjman and Milosevic on the 3rd of January 92 paved the way for the implementation of the plan put forward by Cyrus Vance. There were 4 United Nations protected areas established. However, and from those areas, troops had to be withdrawn, but the JNA, although it may have officially withdrawn from Croatia, eventually in May 92, it left large portions of its weaponry and personnel behind in the Serb-held areas, turned them over to the police of the Republic of Serbia, Serbian Krajina. And despite the plan, displaced persons weren't allowed to return to their homes, and those few Croats and other non-Serbs who remained in Serb-occupied areas were expelled in the following months. The territory of the RSK remained under Serb occupation until large portions of it were retaken by Croatian forces in 2 operations in 1995. So what was the plan? Evidence will show that it was territorial gain through ethnic cleansing. The same man, Simovic, the Minister of Defense, wrote to a man called Vuk Drašković, a Serb nationalist leader with a small party. And so far as material, the first part may not put it in context, but it says this: by this time in the heart of Serbia, because Serbia is today being defended beyond the administrative borders with Croatia, if we do not embrace our goals that we've almost achieved, we may find ourselves defending Serbia at some future checkpoints or on our Belgrade doorsteps tomorrow. Complete integration of plan. Who was in charge? Let's return again to the man Simovic. He said this: our mentality is to think as the boss says. The man at the top thinks on behalf of everybody else. It's always been like this in our history. Every time I went to the parliament to address the representatives, I had to go to meet our civilian boss to ask for my opinion. Usually he would arrange for these meetings to take place on the same day as my address to the parliament. He'd then postpone it so that the session of the parliament had to be extended to allow me to go and see Mr. Milosevic. I then had to say whatever I was told, ignoring the notes I prepared myself. On one occasion, I wanted to tell the representatives about the heroism of Mr. Šešel's volunteers. Mr. Milosevic told me I could not say that, because as he put it, why should we glorify him? A last photograph, a few last points, and then I'll move to Bosnia. The photograph, oh, no, I'm sorry. The second map, yes, we must just look at that. The first map we've been looking at showed what was the ambition in Croatia of the Croatian Serbs. There are many maps. Rarely do they entirely match one with another. But this map, of course slightly differently configured, shows the areas that in the event were held, the areas that it took some time, that's the hatched areas. Thank you very much. And also in the east, shows the areas that were held, areas that were in due course and subject to the qualifications I've already made, eventually returned. Let me now look at a last photograph and then a few more points. This is a photograph of 3 men. It was taken at a military parade in the Krajina on the 28th of June 1995, shortly before the Krajina collapsed. Milosevic on the right, of whom we've spoken, the accused links with him clear. Less than 2 months before this particular photograph, he'd ordered the indiscriminate rocket attacks on Zagreb, for which he was indicted by this tribunal. The accused made a sort of verbal condemnation of this man, but took no steps to bring him to justice. The man in the middle, Milosevic, one of those responsible for the massacre at Vukovar, duly indicted by this tribunal. He has spent the years since as a high-ranking officer of the Yugoslav army under the accused watch, with no attempts to submit him to justice. Indeed, he was sent by the accused to take over the ostensibly independent Krajina Serb army. The third man on the left, Milorad Ulemek, also known as Milorad Lukovic, a deputy of Arkan. He commanded a special forces unit of the Serbian Interior Ministry for years. This unit, under various guises, implicated in war crimes in Croatia and in Bosnia, and also in Kosovo during the war there. The appearance of, maybe from time to time, as the evidence unfolds, of autonomous, separate actions, apparently without connection. The reality, of course, the reality that this chamber must uncover in its search for the truth, is a coordinated and a criminal enterprise. So far as these 3 men are concerned, they clearly acting together, tied to the accused. Your Honour, there's no need, I think, and I hope, to recite this indictment count by count. The accused has it available to him. It sets out that with which he is charged. And in any event, as we forecast, we will in due course, before calling evidence in relation to Croatia and Bosnia, and following the submission of our case in writing on those parts of the indictment, be allowed a further opportunity to explain our case in detail. What I've said so far is but a summary. In order to put the accused on notice, there is more, of course, to come. But just take, before we move on, if we can all be so, or the court can be so good, a common sense view of what was happening. If the court would be so good, take a common sense approach at some stages to this case. When we look at the 3 areas seeking Serbian independence, they weren't connected. When we look at Dubrovnik, even less so. Were they areas capable of independence, self-support, or did they inevitably need something to join on to? What was it they wanted to be a part of? It was Serbia. At the time that they were acting, was there even the intervening prospect or the intervening entity in Bosnia for them to cleave to? No, there was not, although it may have been shortly to come. Were they going to seek to join to something without the consent of that body, without the consent of Serbia and its leader? No, they were not. Were they going to be doing this without his involvement? No, they were not. But the evidence, of course, will have to be dealt with in due course. I turn then now to the Bosnian indictment. Under this indictment, ICTY crimes included or covered include offences in the same category as for Croatia, same categories as for Croatia. They also include genocide, contrary to Article 4 of the statute. The prosecution will submit at the conclusion of the evidence in this trial that the accused intended to destroy the Bosnian, Muslim and Bosnian Croat communities in part, which is in accordance with the definition of genocide, in order to fulfill the aims of the objectives of the criminal enterprise, where persecutions in themselves would be insufficient to achieve the desired result. Alternatively, that genocide was the natural and foreseeable consequence of the joint criminal enterprise, forcibly and permanently to remove non-Serbs from the territory under control. Alternatively, the accused was an accomplice in that he knew some of the principal perpetrators were committing genocide, and he undertook acts which assisted in their commission. Further, or alternatively, as a superior within the meaning of Article 7.3 of our statute, he knew or had reason to know that genocide was about to be committed or had been committed, and did not prevent or punish the perpetrators thereof. Just one word about genocide before I turn to the facts of this indictment. It is, of course, the crime of crimes. As a word, it is used by those who have suffered away from the legal context. And it is sometimes difficult for them to appreciate that, great though their suffering may be, the word may not apply in law. There is, to that extent, a tension between the use of the word by non-lawyers and its application in courts. Although it may describe the crime of crimes, it does not necessarily always mean that offences can only be of the gravest kind if they do attract that word. For the word has to be given its strict legal meaning. That, we know, is what is going to happen in this court. And we are aware of our duties simply and only to seek a conviction for genocide if and when the legal elements are satisfied. I turn on. Bosnia was one of the 6 constituent republics of the Socialist Federal Republic, once a medieval state occupied by the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and becoming an administrative unit of that state in the 19th century, briefly forming its own government in 1918 before being incorporated into the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, and then becoming, of course, Yugoslavia. During World War II, Bosnia and Herzegovina was incorporated into the independent state of Croatia, sponsored by Germany and Italy, and forces of the ruling Ustaše regime committed widespread and systematic violence aimed at eliminating Jews, Serbs, and others felt to be undesirable. Similar violence, although on a smaller scale, was committed by Serbian Chetniks against non-Serbs. The Muslims suffered proportionately the highest losses in Yugoslavia after the Jews. Bosnia and Herzegovina emerged as a distinct administrative unit after World War II, with the establishment of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. It was the home to 3 religions coexisting within its borders: the primarily Serbian Orthodox Serbs, the predominantly Roman Catholic Croats, and the Bosnian Muslims. The Muslims gradually came to see themselves as a distinct nation separate from Croats and Serbs, recognized in this by the Yugoslavian government in 1970. Relations between the constituent populations improved following World War II and under Tito's regime, and although of course perceptions will be various, by the 1980s it may be that members of the 3 groups lived and worked together well, especially in the cities. The free elections of November 1990, I think I've dealt with the spoils of government being divided up. The Serbs' political party, the SDS of Bosnia-Herzegovina, an offshoot of the Croatian party, and we've seen in Croatia how intimately the accused was involved in that particular party. As the war continued in Croatia, it appeared increasingly unlikely that Bosnia and Herzegovina would not also declare independence from the Socialist Federal Republic. The party, the SDS, realizing perhaps that it couldn't prevent secession of Bosnia and Herzegovina from the Republic, began the creation of a separate Serbian entity within Bosnia and Herzegovina. And several Serbian autonomous regions were formed, just as in Croatia. And we see here a map which is titled at the bottom, "The Serbian Autonomous Districts or Regions as defined by the proclamation of the 21st of November 1991, published in the Official Gazette." The areas familiar probably to the tribunal in any event, the Krajina, Northern Bosnia, Semberia, Romania, Birac, Herzegovina. Now, not long after this, the accused, say the prosecution, together with the man Karadzic and others, formed a plan permanently to remove the Bosnian Muslims and Bosnian Croats on the territory they wanted through a campaign of persecution. In the spring of '92, that plan went into effect, and in places where the persecution was insufficient, the execution of the plan escalated to genocide. The prosecution will assert, and does assert, that this accused took pains to conceal his participation in the enterprise. However, the Bosnian Serb leadership and military could not have done what they did without his massive, ongoing, informed assistance. There are various ways of looking at the links. Throughout 1991, the Croatian Serb leadership, the Bosnian Serb leadership, and elements of the JNA and the Yugoslav leadership were operating on a single plan, it is asserted by the prosecution, to erase Croatia and Bosnia's borders as proclaimed by the accused on numerous occasions. Another quotation, and I think we can see this, from the 15th of January 1991. As far as the Serbian people are concerned, they want to live in one state. Yes, thank you. Yes, it is. As far as the Serbian people are concerned, they want to live in one state. Hence, divisions into several states, which would separate the Serbian people and force them to live in different sovereign states, is, from our point of view, unacceptable. What this meant in practice was visible during the war in Croatia, the permanent removal of unwanted populations. The accused was also instrumental in the passage at that time of the Serbian law on defense, which in the event of war placed the police and territorial defense under the control of the president himself. And Article 39 of that law would establish the apparent legal legitimacy for the Serbian Ministry of Defense to begin recruiting and equipping Serb paramilitaries that were sent to Bosnia and engaged in ethnic cleansing of targeted municipalities. So there was preparation in the law and execution of the law for the purposes of the Serbs in Bosnia. Karadzic shared Milosevic's goal, Karadzic leader, of course, of the party. On the 23rd of February 1991, in Milosevic's presence, he said this: "We do not see that this should be discussed. Serbs living exclusively in a joint state, just as it is natural that rain falls, it's natural for Serbs to live in that same state." And on the 26th of February 1991, Karadzic acknowledged Milosevic as the representative of the Bosnian Serbs in case of Yugoslavia's disintegration. On the 25th of March, we've already made some reference to this. There was the Karađorđevo meeting. I needn't repeat that. And Bosnian SDS party declared that only Milosevic was authorized to represent the Bosnian Serbs in negotiations on the future of Yugoslavia, that they had given him their party position, because if not him, it would have had to be Izetbegovic. But nevertheless, all of this shows a complete integration of the party in Bosnia with their ideological, if it was an ideology, leader. Karadzic, repeatedly encouraged by the accused, put his SDS organization at the disposal of the Yugoslav army in order to provide assistance in manpower to that army for its war effort in Croatia in the summer and autumn of 1991, as it were a link between three of the important parties, not just two. And he maintained regular and in certain crisis situations almost constant telephone communications with the accused and other officials in Belgrade, discussing with them and consulting on the broadest possible range of issues of common concern. Evidence of intercepted phone calls will reveal these and other matters. In these contacts, he frequently, but not always, assumed the role of eager subordinate and willing collaborator in the ideas and designs originating in Belgrade. Karadzic valued the contacts, and following a discussion regarding proceedings for the Hague conference held here on the 29th of October of 91, was reassured by the accused that their conversations represented a sort of coordinating body acting to protect the interests of the Serbian people. We must look briefly at the chronology of events of what was to be known as the Republika Srpska. We start with the proclamation in September 91 of the autonomous region of Herzegovina. You've seen them on the plan. On the 16th of September, the Krajina proclaimed. On the 15th of October, a meeting of the SDS Party Council. I beg your pardon, I've omitted something that I should have put in. Before we move on, we're just past two proclamations of independence. Let's see what was written by a group of JNA reservists in October 1991. It's written, let me just get my copy of this. It comes from a group of JNA reservists, and it goes to a number of people, including this accused, Kadevic, Karadzic, Plavšić, and others. And it's dated sometime in October, it would appear, 1991. Second paragraph, we would like first to explain that we've chosen this action because of the inhuman treatment we've received from some officers. They tasked some of us with the most loathsome assignments, liquidations of Muslim and Croat individuals, and threatened with drumhead court-martial if we failed to obey the orders. The almost beastly conditions in which we lived are another reason for deciding to take this action. We are prepared to submit written statements on these issues and on others that have compelled us to make this move, but we shall disclose them only to the officials. 2 points emerge. One, what had they been asked to do? Two, the point I made right at the beginning this morning. Did he know what was being done? Of course he did. 15th of October, the Serb party of the Serb Democratic Party, the SDS Party Council, was formed the Assembly of Serbian People of Bosnia and Herzegovina. On the 22nd of October, the accused called for unitary Serb state, and the Rump presidency, to which we've referred, called for mobilization of reservists in Serbia and other regions that want to stay in Yugoslavia. On the 26th of October, Karadzic declared a full mobilization of territorial defense and field units in the Serb Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Karadzic became more explicit about what the single state would look like. There was to be a plebiscite in November 91, but before that he said this: "I am telling you, whatever Bosnia we have one day, no Muslim foundation shall ever be laid in Serb areas and Serb villages, whether or not you import Turks, because we will instruct Serbs not to sell land to Muslims." He continued in an address, a public address, after loud applause, "The first foundations that are laid will be blown up. It is not always good to disclose one's plans, but it's not bad to say that we will not give them up, because we will proclaim, you must not sell land to Muslims. You must not. This is a fight to the finish, a battle for living space." The same exhibit produces the following quotations of interest. Asking, it may not be on this particular version of the exhibit, but we'll find elsewhere in the same speech that the man Karadzic asked the ouster of radio chairmen and editors who did not listen and did not respect the policy, an exhortation to people to take over the public accounting system, an instruction to his followers to be energetic and strict, to get ready to go and establish authority in territories, municipalities, regions, and local communities. He said this: "Serbs do not need an army for their party, the army is here. And incidentally, theirs and our aims overlap 100%. Do not leave that equipment and that army alone. Don't. That would be a disgrace. We would lose the state if we were to lose that army." On the 9th and 10th of November, there was a plebiscite called by the Bosnian Serbs. The result may be of questionable significance given the different questions that were asked of different groupings. The result was to stay in Yugoslavia. On the 21st of November, all right. Perhaps I ought to look at this document. This is the document reflecting the plebiscite. "Pursuant to the right for self-determination," it reads, "and for the purpose of the full and permanent protection of the rights and interests of the Serbian people in Bosnia and Herzegovina determine that the Serbian people in Bosnia and Herzegovina remain in the joint state of Yugoslavia." This was a decision for the Serbian people to remain. But I move on to save time if I can. Romania, Birac, and Semberia declared their position on the 21st of November. On the same day, an assembly proclaimed as part of Yugoslavia all places that had over 50% of Serb voters who voted to stay in Yugoslavia. And on the 11th of December, the assembly requested the Yugoslavian army to protect as Yugoslavia those parts of Bosnia-Herzegovina where the plebiscite had taken place. On the 19th of December, the party of Karadzic issued instructions for takeover of municipalities, and on the 9th of January of 92, the Assembly adopted a proclamation of the Serbian Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina, declared to be part of federal Yugoslavia. The territory of that republic was declared to include the territories of the Serbian autonomous regions and districts and of other Serbian ethnic entities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, including the regions in which the Serbian people remained in the minority due to the genocide conducted against it in World War II. It was declared to be part of the federal Yugoslav state, changing its name on the 12th of August to the name by which it's probably better known in this institution now, the Republic of Srpska. In January of that same year, human rights organizations and international diplomats had notified the accused of crimes committed by Arkan's Tigers, Šešel's men, Captain Dragon's men, all based in Serbia. He'd promised to investigate and punish those responsible. He never did. Rather, he continued, say, the prosecution with other members of the criminal enterprise to ensure that all those men enjoyed the necessary support that they needed to continue in the commission of criminal acts. Let's look at a map, which is one of many maps, but this is a map that shows the maximum ambition of the party at the time. The red line, which we've had laid over another map, shows just how much of the territory, which we can now see, the light blue territory, that was to be consumed as part of the Republic of Srpska and, of course, the areas into Croatia. An ambitious plan indeed, and the documents will show that was in the mind of these people at the time. A plan that, of course, disregarded the interests of many. On the 29th of February, or between then and the 2nd of March, in the Bosnian referendum on independence that the Serbs boycotted, there was a vote for independence. And on the 18th of March, at the 11th session of their assembly, the decision of the Serbs' assembly in Bosnia, the decision was made to prepare proposals for a takeover of power in the Republic of the Serbian people of Bosnia-Herzegovina. And in short, what happened was that armed takeovers followed. Notwithstanding that, the United States and the European community recognized the independence of Bosnia-Herzegovina on the 6th of April. And then we have on the 12th of May, at the 16th Assembly, a famous document, I think. There you go. Excerpt from the speech of Karadzic on this occasion to the Serbian people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, held on the 12th of May, and it's his 6 points. The Serbian side in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the presidency, the government, the Council for National Security, which we've set up, have formulated the strategic priorities of the Serbian people. The first such goal, separation from the other two national communities, separation of states, separation from those who are our enemies and who've used every opportunity, especially in this century, to attack us, and who would continue with such practices if we were to stay together in the same state. The second strategic goal, it seems to me, is a corridor between Semberia and Krajina. So that is a very important strategic goal which we have to achieve, because there will be no Krajina, no Bosnian Krajina, Serbian Krajina, or alliance of Serbian states if we do not secure that corridor, which will integrate us and give us unimpeded flow from one part of our state to another. Third strategic goal, to establish a corridor in the Drina Valley. That is, elimination of the Drina as a border between two worlds. We are on both sides of the Drina. Our strategic interest and our living space are there. Fourth strategic goal, establishment of the border on the Una and Neretva rivers. Fifth strategic goal, division of the city of Sarajevo into Serbian and Muslim parts, and implementation of an effective state government in each of these two constituent states. Sixth strategic goal, access of the Serbian Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina to the sea. It is not unimportant. It's very important. But some things are more important than others, or more feasible than others. At that same session, Mladic, the general, indicted, of course, at this tribunal, announced that it would be impossible to separate Serbs, and that to do so would constitute genocide. From non-Serbs would constitute genocide. Now, the Bosnian indictment starts in March 1992. The relevant history in a nutshell is as follows. With the establishment of the Republic of Srpska, supported by this accused, And with the break from Bosnia-Herzegovina, the municipalities were taken over, expulsions and associated killings followed, all with the accused support, say the prosecution. Crimes were committed, and then in January and between then and May 1993, there was a break between Karadzic and the accused. It was about a plan then being advanced, known as the Vance-Owen plan. The accused argued that it should be accepted. The Bosnian Serbs refused. The prosecution's case, subject of course of evidence, will be that he continued to support them financially, whatever was being public, by way of a break. In a statement on the 11th of May, two statements on the same day, but I'll collapse them, the accused said these things. First, the decision on the peace plan concerns the interests of Yugoslavia, Serbia, and Montenegro, Krajina in Croatia, and the Serbian Republic in Bosnia-Herzegovina. All citizens and the whole of the Serbian nation, not only the Assembly and the citizens of the Serbian Republic. He then said this: I therefore believe that the decision on this cannot be made only by the citizens of the Serbian Republic, but by all the people's representatives elected to the parliaments of Yugoslavia, Serbia, Montenegro, Krajina, and the Serbian Republic, equally and with full respect for the interests of their citizens and the Serbian nation, for peace, freedom, equality, and violence. The excerpt, which is now on the overhead projector, adds, I think, this. He made the following statement: in the past 2 years, the Republic of Serbia, by assisting Serbs outside Serbia, has forced its economy to make massive efforts and its citizens to make substantial sacrifices. These efforts and these sacrifices are now reaching the limits of endurance. Most of the assistance was sent to people and fighters in Bosnia-Herzegovina, but a substantial amount of aid was given to the 500,000 refugees in Serbia. Serbia has lent a great deal of assistance to the Serbs in Bosnia. Owing to that assistance, they have achieved what they wanted.
The interpreters kindly request that the sleepers slow down, please.
This brings us...
Being lost, slow down, please.
My apologies to the interpreters. I do apologize. I detected I was speeding up and should have adjusted earlier. We've reached the middle of 1993, and because everything about this accused in our submission to the Chamber will have to be looked at in an integrated way, it may be helpful just to reflect on something that was happening at home. I forecast this a little earlier when I said we will see just how this man was willing to exercise force and to use force, even on his own, when it was necessary. What we're going to see is a video of the way demonstrators were dealt with back in Serbia, right at this time, at the time that the plan with Karadzic is reaching fulfillment. Can we just see this video? Demonstration. This is how the MUP police force, or part of the police force, would deal with those who would not accept this accused crime. This is the home state as created by this accused. the man who says, I think, he was only defending legitimate interests. I return to the split that there was between the accused and Karadzic. There was a border closing between the Republic of Srpska and Serbia, but not until 1994, and even then, not for military traffic. There was a reduction, but not an elimination, of financial and military support for the Republic of Srpska, as Mladic was later to reveal. Despite the disagreements between the accused and Karadzic, the real split on the level of cooperation between the Republic of Serbia and the Republic of Srpska did not occur. They were the subject of tightly closed borders for the months of August to November 94, but it was impossible to stop greater cooperation between these two particular entities. Businesses were too tightly connected, and it was impossible for this accused to ignore the protests that Serbian companies who were suffering financially made because of the embargo. In July of 94, just before the break, there was, the split was reflected in a closing of borders. There was a working group, the interministerial working group, to assist the problems that were arising. This meant that the Republic of Serbia was still financially helping the projects, and the Serbian Ministry for Cooperation with Serbs outside of Serbia was in charge of that body. And the prosecution case is that support for military activities continued in various ways. We must come then to two particular events. First, Sarajevo. Sarajevo, mentioned of course in the indictment, suffered an almost uninterrupted barrage of attack between 1992 and 1995 with terrorized civilians. The aim, we've seen it already, was to separate and divide the city and to tie down the troops of the Bosnian Muslims. In May of 1995, General Mladic, in a speech, said that it was the Yugoslav army which provided the Bosnian Serb army, the Republic of Srpska army, with weapons and other equipment covering more than 50% of its needs. We turn to Srebrenica. The Muslims there in an enclave in a UN-safe area. The Muslims so attacked that there was a massacre, as we know, of an enormous number of people, and I'll have to say something else about that shortly. As the war began, the Bosnian Serb leadership became entirely clear about its intentions, and the prosecution case is that the accused had to have known what they were. We've looked at the 6 goals document already, or the 6 objectives document already. On the 12th of May of 1992, the Bosnian Serb Minister of Health argued that their army, I suppose then still the JNA, ought to destroy the Bosnian government's civilian hospital in Sarajevo so that the enemy had nowhere to go for medical help. When the war began in Bosnia, units connected with this accused were among the earliest perpetrators of crimes. Arkan, in particular in Bijeljina, starting as early as the 1st of April 92, the JNA elsewhere, and others traceable to his control. The JNA was still deployed throughout Bosnia, and the accused no longer bothered to conceal his control over it. One high international official witness before you will testify that in discussions in November 1991 regarding the Yugoslav army's role in that region, the accused stated he would agree to the army's withdrawal once a UN peacekeeping operation was established. So, there he is, in his position of Serbia, dealing with the federal army and what it was going to do in the country of Bosnia under attack. What about the relationship between the JNA and the army VRS of the Bosnian Serbs? Although the JNA did withdraw in name, I'm reminded that I should have dealt with another wiring diagram, and I haven't marked my text accordingly, but I'll deal with it now. If the court has this document, subject to the same qualifications, on the top, a simplified illustration of the accused's participation in the joint criminal enterprise. At the bottom on the left, a reminder that the lines on the chart do not necessarily represent command and control between the parties. We see something not dissimilar from what we've seen before. The accused in the middle with his various roles set out, the rump presidency on the left commanding the JNA with the various people identified. Something called the Supreme Defense Council, now coming into existence, composed of people from the rump presidency and also the accused himself. Immediately below him, the Serbian Ministry of Interior, under his effective control. That body, with its identified leaders, having direction over the Serbian special forces, including the Red Berets and the Arkanovci. To the right, the Bosnian Serb leadership. It will be for the chamber to decide whether the influence and control is as stated by the prosecution and as necessary for conviction in this case. The Bosnian Serb leadership, with under its control municipal crisis staffs, which we haven't yet mentioned, but I think which will be familiar to the chamber from other dealings it's had in other cases in general terms, Bosnian Serb, MUP, and the VRS or territorial defense with Ratko Mladic. What is interesting is to look at the second diagram, which seeks to set out what connections there may have been between the JNA on the left and the VRS of Ratko Mladic on the right. And so this second, again, simplified illustration, subject to the usual observations, suggests that the connection between the VJ and the VRS, to use acronyms for speed, was multifaceted and of very great value, importance, as reflected by these items: supply of personnel, payment of officers' salaries, supply of military equipment and munitions, provisions of training, sharing of communication systems, sharing of intelligence, linkage between radio technical reconnaissance systems. So that presents in diagrammatic form, and we hope, subject to all the qualifications helpful for the chamber to have in mind, a picture of the relationship that existed between the JNA and the VRS. So that although the JNA withdrew in name from Bosnia and Herzegovina in May of 1992, support continued. by that support and by his other aspects of control, of which we'll hear more in the trial, he bears responsibility for the acts committed in Bosnia by the VRS. Before the formal withdrawal of the JNA from Bosnia and Herzegovina, the accused was instrumental in shifts of personnel that simply moved personnel across to create an essentially Bosnian Serb army from one that had formerly been composed of an ethnic mix. And such restructuring evidences his appreciation for and intention that this essentially Serb JNA should intercede on the side of Serbs in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as to set the stage for the creation of a separate Bosnian Serb army when that was necessary. From the autumn of 1991, then, as the JNA began to withdraw its forces from Croatia, forces under the control of the JNA started to redeploy in Bosnia and Herzegovina, many of them going to exactly those places where there was a gap. There was no garrison and no other JNA facility.
Mr. Nice, if you'd find a convenient moment at about 4:05.
Certainly. The accused had exercised control over the JNA through the Yugoslav presidency. But on the 27th of April of 1992, the Supreme Defense Council that we saw on the first two of those diagrams was formed. I indicated in summary its composition. It exercised a substantial influence and control over other members the accused exercised substantial influence and control over other members of the Council, and the Supreme Defense Council and the President of the Republic had, de jure, had power in law over the army, first the JNA and then the VJ. So that the accused was, perhaps typically, exercising control in more than one way over the object of his control, both through individuals and through channels of communication and authority. He used his position on the Supreme Defense Council to ensure that the former JNA, now becoming and being called the VJ, should continue to support and cooperate with the VRS in Bosnia. The VJ contributed to the crimes through its relationship in the way that I've just described. Your Honour, I've dealt in summary form on the diagram with the headings that I could enlarge on. We can just, what I propose to do, I think, to save time, is to abbreviate what I'll say about these headings in detail and just look at one or two exhibits that exemplify some of the points. They're in the pack of papers that you have. So under personnel support, we can just look at the exhibit that creates the 30th Personnel Centre. This is the body that organised the payment of the VRS officers. There were 12,000 such officers, I think. And here you see, I'd have to get my copy. In future working, there's a document from 6th of March of 1993. In future working lists to be delivered to this command not later than the 5th of each month for a previous month, in order to send them timely to the Military Computing Centre of the General Staff of the Yugoslav Army for their payment. Thus were the officers of the VRS paid. Moving from personnel support over, I needn't trouble with the detail of the other categories, extensive training. There was direct military activity in Bosnia. This will be the subject of evidence, and in particular in the struggle for Bratunac, a name that will become sadly familiar here. There was the public statement of one of the generals of the Yugoslav army admitting presence of his units, an admission corroborated by orders he signed. He even noted the problems of accommodating so many troops of both armies together. In relation to activity by the troops on the territory itself, we'll see reference to this in war histories. And can we look at another exhibit which has a connection to helicopter, or is a helicopter, I think. Yes. This is a document of the 3rd of November, reading as material. One brigade from the Herzegovina Corps, Ministry of the Interior Forces, up to the strength of battalion 500 people. Yugoslav Army Special Forces, up to 120 people, and a helicopter squad, with its main forces through a decisive defence of the greater section of the front, shall prevent an enemy breakthrough from central Bosnia and Gorazde towards Sarajevo. This an order that reveals the participation of the accused's forces, as he no doubt regarded them at that stage. I think I have 2 more exhibits to go before I come to the end of this section. Would you like me to go that far, or would you like me to stop?
No, deal with this.
Yes. A great deal of evidence about supply and support. One document in relation to standardization of procedures. The next document is a document dated the 15th of February 1995, and it deals with, thank you very much, the command of corps and their subordinated units or their members can address RS official organs and institutions in the SRJ and RS case solely via the VRS main staff. Completely integrated. And then the next document, an order directing that supply requisitions from the VRS to the VJ be regularized and systematized. Reading, only the commander, his deputy and assistant for logistics of the Republika Srpska army shall have the right to approve direct contacts with the general staff of the army of Yugoslavia. In addition to standardization of procedure, there was the sharing of intelligence and a great deal of evidence about that. And indeed, perhaps I can conclude with this feature of the appeals chamber decision in Tadic, which it may be possible for us to pray in aid, not that it's necessary, but for reasons of consistency, where it was held the armed forces of the Republika Srpska were to be regarded as acting under the overall control and on behalf of the FRY, paragraph 162 of the appeals judgment. Your Honour, if that would be a convenient moment, I have certainly more to go on Bosnia before we come to Kosovo. I'll see if I can make some reductions in the time it will take overnight.
How long do you anticipate being?
I think I shall be the morning overall.
Very well, we'll adjourn until tomorrow morning, 9:30.
All rise. Veuillez vous lever.